Hi, my name is Shang. Today I'll be talking to you how you can check your Firestore data with Palm API Maker Suite and Firebase. Food edition. So in the session early on from my friend Cleo, she talked about a Firestore, which is basically a persistent storage on the cloud for you to save data. So it's basically just a database. Before I continue, I just want to a little bit of intro about myself. So my name is Shang. Saya dari Malaysia. Jadi saya bercakap bahasa Malaysia saja. Atau semua kalian bisa memahami bahasa Malaysia? Bisa, okey. Okey, boleh. So, Google Developer Expert Firebase, ini juga LinkedIn saya dengan Medium. Saya selalunya menulis artikel mengenai Firebase kat sini. So, nak tumpang tanya, adakah kamu semua developers? Atau masih belajar lagi? Belajar, student kan? Oh, yang belajar programming kan? Okey. Ya, jadi hari ini session ni untuk kalian semua sebagai seorang developer. Right. So, perspektif developer untuk menggabungkan aplikasi kamu dengan LLM. Ya, so saya tukar balik kepada bahasa Inggeris lah. Okey, tak berapa tak biasa bercakap bahasa Melayu kat sini Okay, so today my perspective is how you as a developer, or who are you learning to be a developer, how can you add LLM capabilities into your application, right? So as the previous session before, we talked about LLM, so today I want to bring a more easier understanding, because me myself as an engineer, I'm not a data scientist, I'm not an ML person, so I have zero knowledge about machine learning. So I want to bring my learnings to you guys as well, so it makes it a lot faster. So the first thing, we always see this word LLM, right? We do know what LLMs are usually. When people ask you about what LLMs are, you say ChatGPT and Bard, right? But in actual fact, what actually is an LLM? So if you look at the picture here, you can see it's a series of text. Right, so here it says it's raining cats and dogs, right? As you can see on top, the most likelihood that the dog will appear is quite high. So in simple words, LM is just a autocomplete, right? So you've probably done autocomplete for a very long time, but LMs are basically just very advanced autocompletes. Let's do an exercise. Ini test bahasa Inggeris kamu? Semua ada belajar bahasa Inggeris kan? Okay. Roses are red. Violets are blue kan? Right? Violets are blue. So this is auto-generated because like the machines and you know that the next phrase or sentence will be violets are blue. Agar silaturahmi tak terputus? Yeah, so maka pinjam dulu 100. So it's basically the same thing. So you kind of now understand what LLMs are, right? So kalau ada orang tanya kamu atau cikgu tanya apa tu LLM, kamu boleh berikan contoh sebegini. Right. So let's get started in the actual session of today. We want to check our Firestore data. So before we begin, I just want to give a brief introduction what Firestore is. So just a revision here. So Firestore is a database. Database is a place where you can put in data and you can refer it to later. Say for example a hard disk drive or thumb drive, in this case, or databases. But Cloud Firestore actually exists in the cloud, in the awan-awan yang tidak kelihatan. Okay, so this is a cloud database where all your apps can connect to it to retrieve data. So let's say you create a chatting app with your friends, and then when you say something you want your friends to see it, how it works is that data is sent to the cloud, and that data is copied over to your computer or to your app, right? So that is basically what Cloud Firestore is. So supposedly, we have a scenario. So show of hands, how many of you have been to a restaurant? Huh? How many of you, some other guy pernah pergi restoran? Restoran, you call restaurant, right? Okay. You have been to a restaurant, right? How many of you have been to a restaurant where the waiter ignores you? Ada kan yang tidak peduli. So in this case, let's say you are a person who owns a restaurant and you don't want to hire waiter or waitress, right? And you give the menu to the customer. But let's say your menu is very big, right? You have seen menu that is very big before, right? Like the other day I went to this bakso place and then they have like bakso buaya, and then bakso pizza. I don't know what kind of bakso place is that, but they have a very long list of different weird bakso stuff, right? So how can you create an app that allows your customer to just check and say, hey, what is your recommendations of today? Or can you recommend something that everyone orders, for example? So this is what we want to create with your data, right? So let's say, for example, your restaurant serves this kind of thing. So in my warung, I have few things. One I call Michael Jackson. This is a Malaysian term and a Singaporean term. Do you guys have this also? The first one? It's soy milk with chin chow. Right? What do you call it? Just chin chow. Okay. Because in Malaysia and Singapore we call it Michael Jackson. Right. Can you roughly know why is it called Michael Jackson? Or do you kind of understand why it's called Michael Jackson? Right? For those who pembaris or a bit not there yet, because it's black and white, right? So, like Michael Jackson, that's what we call it. So if you go to Malaysia, Singapore, and you ask the staff, do you have Michael Jackson? They will usually say yes, right? So yeah. And of course, we also have teh tarik, right? Milk tea. But in our case, in Malaysia, we like a lot of sweet drinks, and we usually say if something is very sweet, then we will say you're going to get your kaki potong kaki. Yeah. So in this case, let's say you have menu called potong kaki milk tea. Right, to indicate very sweet. And you have something about cheese that we like so much, I don't know why, and we like to put a lot of cheese on it. So in this case, you have chicken chop melele. Right? I don't know whether the Indonesia has the word melele also. Yeah, I guess it's the same meaning. So a lot of drizzling cheese. So let's say these are the 3 items in your menu, right? So now, what you want to do as a developer, you want to be able to make an app where people can ask questions. What drinks, in this case, what drinks do you have? And your app will then query the data on your database and then figure out which one matches what the user has asked for and give you an output. In this case, it says we have Michael Jackson and potong kaki milk tea, right? So as a developer, how can I get from point A, from the question, to the last point here, to the answer you want? So for me as a developer, I know how to do this normally by writing programs, right? Or writing statements, query statements. So I can do something like filter by food type, and then it will give you the result, right? But this is a chatting app, right? You don't know what the user will ask, right? So you cannot anticipate the user's question. So what can we do to help facilitate this by using LLMs? So in order to do that, let's validate our idea to see whether it actually works. So we can use MakerSuite to do that. So as the session before, MakerSuite is a way for you to prototype your LLM kind of apps. So let's take a look at an example. And inside the MakerSuite, it actually utilizes something called the Palm API to help you convert text into something useful for you. So we will go through this as well. So ever since Google I/O is now global availability and it supports the workspace environment. So if you have a Google Suite account, you can use it as well. And in certain countries, it is now available for production, right? So usually LLMs are created for a few purposes, right? One of the few things, or rather LLM chat apps are created for a few purposes. One of them is customer service, product recommenders, etc. So let's take a look at for an example for this. So here I go to the example I have, right? In this case, I created a prompt to tell it what to do. So in this case, I give some information about it. I say you are a waiter bot, what can you do? You're a large language model available by whatever restaurant. Your job is to make sure you give the menu to the user based on what the user has asked for. So in this case, this is an example where I provided a menu, Michael Jackson and milk tea. So at the bottom, you can see that the user has asked a question, and we click on the run command, it will automatically generate the next set of text. And if you notice, when the user asks further questions about the topic, it tells you information based on the menu you have. So you can keep asking based on your chat history, and it's able to infer based on your context to give you the output you want. So in this case, for example, I asked about what is Michael Jackson, and now I ask what about the milk tea. So it knows by context that I'm talking about to ask the user or ask the bot to explain the description, right? So this is one example you can use MakerSuite for to test your ideas out. In this case, it's pretty straightforward. You provide a prompt and a sample menu. But now you're done with this, I want to make sure my app actually works. So what we need to do right now is to change this section of the menu to be based on the data you asked for. So let's say if I ask the user, what drinks do you have? The app should know to pull all the drinks from my database and put it in the menu here. If I ask, do you have anything spicy? It knows how to pull all the spicy food. In this case, Indonesia is 99.9%, and put it in the menu. So it depends on different questions that the user asks at the start for this menu to be generated automatically. So we're going to just do that. So before I go into that, when I was trying to do some research about LLMs and how do I do this, I came across a few keywords that was hard for me to understand. The first thing was prompt engineering. You probably heard this sentence a lot of times, right? So how can you create prompts that are useful in your cases? And the next thing I keep coming across is called vector embedding. So I've seen this in a lot of articles, but I don't really actually understand what it means. And every time I search for it, it always gives me roughly this sort of answer, right? In machine learning, embedding is a way to represent data as points in n-dimensional space so that similar data points cluster together. So as an engineer who is really bad at math, my reaction is this: I don't really know what that sentence even means. So let me break it down even simpler for you so that you understand more. So take a look at this visualization of an embedding vector space. So for example, let's look at the opposites, right? Male and female. You can see in this three-dimensional plane, these 2 points appear opposite of each other in a relative distance. You can see another example is the country and capital. They all are pointing to the same direction, and they give you the answers you want. So some of you might think this is a bit confusing. It's okay. Let's turn it down even more useful, for example. So earlier on, you have Michael Jackson, and also you have your S Dodger, but in Malaysia we call it Air Bandung. So I don't know why in Malaysia it's called Air Bandung, but here it's called S Dodger, right? Right. So I heard it actually comes from Bandung. I'm not sure anyone from Bandung here knows.
It's actually this.
It is? Okay, okay. Yeah, so technically Malaysian one pays better respect, right? We call it by its name, right? Yeah. So in this example, you will see that the S Dodger and the Michael Jackson are very close to each other, mainly because they are drinks, and also they are cold, and maybe because they have chin chow inside. So this is how the embedding space will look like in the computer. So this is just a visual representation of it. And then we also have our potong kaki milk tea, teh tarik here, which is slightly further away, because it could be, because it's hot, so maybe it's further away, but it's still a drink. So that's why they're still within that same space, roughly. And you can see another Michael Jackson at the bottom, right? That is totally opposite of what we want. So the computers don't get confused between, are you asking for the actor or asking for the drink itself? So this is how large language models work. Based on the sentence, the passage that you give them, you condense everything into one very simplified form and convert it into vector points. So on the opposite of drinks is food, right? So you have your chicken chop and your nasi lemak also, and both of them are in the same category probably because they have a lot of cheese and they are both Malay at the same time, right? And you have a tom yum oden, which is probably in the soup section nearer to bakso, in a sense, right? So this is how a vector space is visualized for humans to see. But in real life, they don't look like this. In real life, they look like a set of numbers. So through the Palm API that is powered in the Maker Suite, is that all your text is consolidated into numbers and transformed to a similarity vector. So as you can see here, all these numbers don't mean anything to us, but means a lot to the computer. Because based on the data set that Google has, it's able to know what is the distance between text or the relationship between text within your provided paragraph here. So how do we actually generate these embeddings? You can use the Palm API, which is currently free. And it's in a public preview. So if you're interested, feel free to go to the Maker Suite to generate your API key. And in this example, what do squirrels eat? I just say I want to generate my embedding vectors. Remember all those numbers? And you have to do something with it. So you just import the library. This is Python, by the way. Access the API key, provide the text you want to convert into numbers or vectors. Specify the model and create the embedding. So the next thing now, I understand what is embedding vectors. So roughly, you guys understand what vector embeddings now is, right? No?
Still processing.
Still no? Okay. Then you probably have to review the slide and take more drinks to see what it means. But the next thing I want to talk to you about is vector similarity search. Now you have all your numbers that is plotted in a graph. What do these numbers actually mean? So there are a lot of different ways to calculate these numbers and the relationship between them. These are a few math stuff which I found online, but I realized I don't really understand them, right? So my reaction with most of you will probably be this. I think right now you're still doing this in your head from the start to the end, which is kind of sad actually, but never mind. And it actually plots a similarity distance between all of these points, I would say. So let's say, for example, I ask, do you have any drinks, right? So it knows based on the text, it converts to a set of numbers that you're talking about drinks. And that vectors is sent to all the other vectors you have. All your S. Dodger, your Michael Jackson, your drinks, everything, and it's plotted based on similarity. So if you look at the blue points here, you can see that both of them are cold and sweet, and potong kaki milk tea is hot. At the bottom is Mariah Carey, next to Christmas, which is always happening in real life. So, and you also have Michael Jackson on the side. So let's go through a demo app to show you how it looks like. Where is the demo app? Okay, it just went away. Okay, here it is. Let me just show you. So this is an example I did for Vietnam. So, but in this case, I'm asking the user how much is one of the food there. So in this case, I'm asking about food. Do you have anything sweet, right? So what happens when I run this question is that it will do whatever I've said just now, generate all the embeddings, take that embedding and compare with all the rest of numbers, and give you a list of selection of menu items. So based on this context, you can even ask more questions based on your own menu. So Palm API is able to figure out the context between different food items and your conversation with it, and give you more and more answers closer to your expected outcome. So in this case, for example, one of the dishes contains coconut. You can say, I'm allergic to coconut, even anything without coconut. So Palm API is able to figure out and condense it to find things that do not have coconut. Right? So let's take a look how it's done. So before we do that, I also want to describe another feature that Firebase has. that you might not know of is cloud functions. So cloud functions are pieces of functions that you run on the internet. So that doesn't sound very obvious, but basically you can write secure code or code that runs all your business logic in an area that is not sitting in your own computer, right? So if you have code that needs to run in different machines, you don't have to have your computer on the same area and turn it on to keep it running. You can actually deploy your code into a machine on the cloud. So this is usually where we use it to write all of our functionality and the heart of this application. So let's go through back to our data here. We have, for example, in your database, you have Michael Jackson, Potong Kaki Milk and Nasi Lemak, right? So what happens now is you need to generate embedding. So embedding here is the numbers that I showed you earlier on, all the numbers that nobody understands. In order to generate that, you need to call the Palm API. You call the Palm API with all the tags that you want to generate, and it gives you a series of numbers. Then in my case, I take all those numbers and store it in a file. So once you have that file, I need to load these numbers into a vector database. So there are a few paid and free options that you can try. As students, I recommend you to try ChromaDB, which you can load on your computer for you to do experimentation. So do try that out. In this case, since this is a Google event, we also have something called a vector search database, but it's not as cheap as I expected. So this is one way you can do it. You create that index and you deploy it. So again, this is an example of the code that you can do. First, you have your embedding data. You have your text, in this case my menu, my food menu, right? My food menu will tell me the food, the description, the ingredients, and the price. I take this piece of text and put it inside the palm.generate embedding function. So this text goes in, it generates the embedding and gives you that embedding out. And then in this case, I'm storing it somewhere. So this is how the embedding data will look like end of the day, right? This is not meant for you as an engineer to understand. This is meant for the machine, the model to understand. So all you need to do is dump this data into a vector database. So it could be Chroma, it could be vector search or whatever database you like. And now we can start our actual search, right? So when the user asks what drinks do you have, I send that question, what drinks do you have, to Palm API. Palm API will convert that question into numbers, in this case vector database, vector embedding. And then you will use that numbers and compare with the numbers I showed you earlier on, the one whole text of numbers. They will compare and find the similar results, right? In this case, you'll tell me, okay, there are two items that are very similar to what you asked for, and I generate a menu that I showed you earlier on as well. And with that menu, you can send that entire menu to the Palm API with the entire text where you say that you are a waiter bot, this is my menu, and the user is asking me this question, what should I reply to the user? So all of this is done in the cloud function, and then what you need to do is just show that chat history to the end user. In this case, we have Michael Jackson and Potong Kaki Milk Tea. So this is a code where how you can query the endpoint. So in this case, it's a vector search. This will vary from what kind of database you use. If you use ChromaDB, it's totally different. But here are the key takeaways that I want you to understand throughout this session. All right. So I was a bit lazy, so I didn't really do. So I asked Bart. Well, it was too long, so this is a more condensed form of it. So right, the first thing is, if you were to use Google's product, the vector search and product, it's a lot easy, but at the same time, you'll be mindful of your cost. But my key takeaway here is that you don't have to use the vector search database. You can always use open source solutions like vector ChromaDB, right? And this ChromaDB can sit in facilities provided by Firebase. For example, Cloud Functions for Firebase, Cloud Run for Firebase. And with that in mind, you can actually connect to all your data that you store in your database. In this case, it's Firestore. I'm able to use Firebase to trigger data based on Firestore. So next time you add a new menu in, I can generate new embeddings based on the changes in the menu. So with that in mind, you're able to understand or get a very easy application that uses Palm API, by extension LN to actually pull your data. So that's pretty much it. Thank you. This is your links to all the things that you can try to get started with. Yeah, and this is the QR code to the slide. Okay, thank you. Terima kasih. Semoga kalian mencuba ya. Oke, itu saja.